Hi, everyone, and welcome to Demystifying the Publishing Experience, preparing the next generation of researchers through library workshops. My name is Sylvia Sheffield. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Collections and Research Librarian for Engineering at the NC State University Libraries. So I collect for a wide range of engineering disciplines, and I'm also involved in work across the collections, like managing our OA agreements.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I'm a customer success manager or CSM here with Elsevier. My pronouns are she, her. I work with a portfolio of academic institutions, including the Carolinas, which of course includes NC State. And my role is really as a main point of contact once a subscription is in place. So in my role, I'm entirely on the customer success side. And my goal is very much making sure that the libraries I support receive the information and the support that they need. And just going back in time, earlier in my career, I did spend more than a decade as an academic librarian. So have spent a lot of time in liaison roles, doing things like instruction and research consults. And like Sylvia, have also worked quite closely with early and mid-career researchers. So Sylvia is going to kick things off by taking us through a publishing workshop series that her team led at NC State. I'll then share a little bit on publisher partnerships and opportunities for events within the publishing space. We'll then share some practical tips for success and also take a look at what's next moving forward. And of course, we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end.
Taking it back to spring of 2023, we at NC State launched a new workshop series on academic publishing. So basically, we thought researchers, especially early career researchers, could use some help navigating the scholarly communications landscape. And I am the one here talking today, but the work that has gone into these workshops has been absolutely a shared endeavor. So the current organizing team is Bertha Chang, Anna Cohen, and myself, and Hillary Davis and Cole Richard are past members who are no longer at NC State. And much credit is also due to our colleagues in the libraries who volunteered to teach these workshops. So our pitch was that we would handle all of the logistics and scheduling and taking attendance, promoting the workshops, and they just had to show up and teach, and people are really happy to collaborate on those terms. So for the first semester, we offered 3 workshops all over Zoom. We had hypothesized that the topics would resonate with researchers, but we honestly weren't expecting the level of interest we got from campus. We ended up with a total of 228 registrations and waitlist slots. And for the actual workshops, we had a pretty high attendance rate at 62%. And you may be wondering, well, what were these workshops that people showed up for? The first one was Introduction to Open Access Publishing. And so this covered, first, what are the reasons why you might want to publish OA? Started to untangle a little bit some of those common publishing models, like what is gold OA, what is bronze, what is green, platinum, and like the different terminology that can be used. And basically explaining like, where is the money coming from? This was also an opportunity for us to advertise our current OA agreements that we have with publishers. And the instructors also led a hands-on activity where participants would search for open journals in their fields they had a choice of a number of tools. One that we see on this slide is DOAJ, and showing them how you can select with APCs or without APCs. And then for the final part of the presentation, they switched gears slightly to talk about OERs and platforms for creating them, in recognition that many of our researchers also have teaching responsibilities or are going to in the future. The second workshop was what you need to know about deceptive publishers. This is one of my favorites. So we got into like what makes a journal or conference deceptive or predatory. Like what are those red flags? We had a lot of real life examples of emails and websites to look at, including uh, emails that had been sent to one of our instructors, Hillary Fox. Um, and we had a hands-on activity looking for signs on a real journal article. This is one that had been submitted to a predatory journal as part of like a sting operation and did indeed get published. So that always was a fun one to go through with folks. There were some Star Wars references in there. Um, and so, yeah, we were equipping them with some things they could reference, like think, check, submit, or think, check, attend. Um, and then we also closed by going into like what is the research community doing to address predatory publishing? We talked a little bit about Retraction Watch, for example. And so this was a really good one. And the third and most popular workshop that first semester was Fundamentals of Crafting a Scientific Article. And this one was coordinated by Shannon and taught by folks from Elsevier. So Shannon will share details on that in a few minutes. I'm not going to steal her thunder. And so across the 3 workshops, we found that the majority of our attendees were grad students, followed by faculty and then staff. Unsurprisingly, we didn't have any undergrads. Another trend we saw was that it was pretty common for participants to register for multiple workshops in the series. So this chart shows registration by academic department or unit across all workshops. Don't worry about not being able to read those little labels. The point here is that our attendance spanned about 50 different departments across campus. So we were really pleased that it had this broad appeal. Just to give an example of the diversity of disciplines, our top 5 were biological sciences, fiber and polymer science, adult and community college education, design, and computer science. So real range of interests there. We also had a post-workshop survey to assess the content of the workshops. This was a Google form that we shared in the chat at the end of the workshop and then sent out via email the next day. As with many post-event surveys, did not get a high response rate, which is understandable. We got about 17% responses. So we asked for overall rating and then had open-ended questions about the most useful and the most confusing parts of the workshop. We also asked what other questions they had about publishing to help us decide on future topics. And across the 3 workshops, we got an overall rating of 4.6 out of 5, which we're really pleased with. And then we also got good information from the open-ended questions. We don't have time to dig into that feedback, but I did want to share a few quotes from researchers. It was very helpful to have presenters break down publishing an article from start to finish with tips, structure, and do's and don'ts. And that one I'm pretty sure was about the Elsevier workshop. Keep the workshops coming. They're very helpful. We even got a heart with that one. Loved it. Excellent guidelines for beginner and expert authors. And that was really great to hear because we had a little something from everyone. Though most of our audience was more early career, we did also have folks attending who were full professors and editors of journals themselves, and everyone was able to come away with something. So after the success of the first semester, we decided, well, we should keep doing this. This fall is now our 4th semester. We've repeated the topics from the first semester, added a few new ones, cycled some out, ranging between 3 and 5 workshops every semester. One of the new ones that we've added since then is getting started with data publication, what, why, and how, to dig into what is research data, what is publication versus sharing, and why might I want to publish instead of sharing on request, particularly highlighting any funder requirements, talking about the implications of the OSTP memo, some of the benefits of using a trusted repository rather than trying to cobble something together yourself. And then also a bit into, well, how do I find the repository that's right for me. So we're talking a bit about disciplinary repositories, and then also did a demo with Dryad, the generalist repository that NC State is an institutional member of. Another workshop that we've offered several times, which has been very popular, is Introduction to Creating Publication Quality Visualizations. So in this workshop, they talked about the different elements of design you might find in a figure, like color and typography, how you title, how you label, contrasting um, colors, patterns, that sort of thing. Um, and also how to even pick the right chart type for your data, for your research question, and your audience. They talked about the importance of looking up the publisher guidelines for figures, because every publisher is going to have their own way they want you to do it in terms of file type and size and potentially some other specifications. And then we ended with some pro tips on, once you've made a chart or graph as good as you want it in Excel or Google Sheets, within the capabilities of those tools, you can then export that and, do some little tweaks with a graphic design software like Photoshop that will really let you do whatever you want to make it pop. We've also collaborated with another publisher, IEEE, for an in-person workshop and pizza lunch on demystifying the peer review process. So big shout out here to Ruth Wolfish, IEEE Client Services Manager. She reached out to us with an idea for this event and then worked with us on and off for months to make it happen. So she covered like how to select an appropriate periodical or conference and when you might want to, go for journal and when you might want to go for conference. What their editors look for in submissions and why they might reject papers. Some late breaking news on IEEE's position on AI tools. And then a really special part was that we had Rhea Uzoy, who is a IEEE journal editor and NC State professor, there as a special guest at Ruth's suggestion. And so she engaged him for his perspective throughout the presentation. And then there was also a really robust Q&A at the end where attendees could ask him all sorts of questions, and he was happy to share his perspective. I will pass it over now to Shannon to talk more about publisher partnerships.
Thanks, Sylvia. So yes, so now I'll chat a bit about how publishers can be partners for these types of library-led events. And I'll also just speak a bit more and share more, really just reflecting back to the Elsevier workshop that Sylvia has mentioned. And so again, this is the name of the session that took place. And we can look even farther back than this past spring. So the session, it actually first took place as a webinar in 2023, and it was very well received. And so we were really happy to learn and discover that we were invited to return for the 2024 lineup. And as Sylvia mentioned, my role, it was very much on the logistical side of things and really making sure that Sylvia's team would have the best, the most knowledgeable, the smartest speakers on this topic for the session. And as you could see, a few different instructors were involved, again, all Elsevier colleagues. And so the webinar, both years, it was led by Megan Jindrisic, who works as a scientific editor. And Megan was joined the previous year by Adam Fraser. And then this past spring was joined by Dale Seaton. And Dale is in the role of executive publisher. And if we think of just these individuals and really for, any of the sessions, instructors who work so closely with the subject matter, with the content, the reality is that they're simply able to provide attendees with a lot of really meaningful, timely, practical insight and information relating to what they need to do and what they're interested in. So in the context of this webinar, our presenters were able to speak on things like the fundamental components of a scientific article, Also breaking down different roles. So whether someone is a journal editor, a reviewer, or a publisher, they could also speak to very practical tips on the actual writing process and writing a really good article, and whether that is connected to preparing tables and figures, writing and organizing the manuscript itself, and also taking the time to think about how to write a really compelling argument, discussion, as well as a really clear conclusion when they are working on their manuscript. They're also in the position of being able to speak, very well to ethical considerations, other best practices. And what I actually have always really appreciated learning about myself during sessions like this is really everything in that space of learning to avoid certain things. So really guidance on, what a new author should avoid doing. So just things for them to be more mindful of. And if we think of early career researchers and essentially someone who, hasn't written a lot in their career yet, this is a new experience for them. We can see how these types of topics, they can resonate, really well with someone who is kind of early on in their journey as an author. And the previous slide, it did mention and allude to the fact that the purpose and goal of the webinar was very much to demystify the publishing experience for up and coming researchers and authors. And for anyone who is new to the publishing experience, having that chance and opportunity to learn directly from people working within publishing, it really gives attendees that instant access to insights that they may not have otherwise. And again, the focus is very much on the practical, and they can bring that information back to their own, life, to their own author toolkit, and also leverage that information during their own writing process and their own writing flow, their workflow. And we've also found that these types of sessions, they also naturally present the opportunity to discuss things like emerging trends with different groups. So whether the group, maybe a group of graduate students or even a group of new faculty members. And so a really timely example of this is certainly AI. We all know that AI continues to be a really hot topic. And during this webinar, our presenters, they were able to take the time and to speak on AI policies for authors, which of course just helps with transparency and really putting new or newish authors at a bit more ease. And looking back, I think a lot of this is connected to, again, being transparent, especially as the publishing process can naturally be a bit intimidating, also a bit mysterious for someone who is still new to it. And again, I think that this experience for this webinar is similar to the other ones that NC State led as part of their series, which is really just making all of these different pieces of meaningful information really digestible and also accessible to attendees for all of the events. And through my own work, I've had the opportunity to organize and moderate several publishing webinars for the institutions that I support kind of within my portfolio. So again, I could say that I have the easier job because I'm just organizing, handling the logistics, rather than preparing the content, which is a very different perspective, kind of that instructor role, certainly. But something that I've observed really as a trending theme is that publishing webinars and conversations that focus on publishing, they always inspire really meaningful and insightful questions from the individuals that are joining, so from the attendees. And these are some of the questions that were asked during the NC State webinar. So you can see there is a range of questions that are of interest to early career researchers. My personal favorite is the one at the bottom. What is the biggest mistake you see authors make? And I've heard several journal editors speak to this, and they often talk a lot about how the biggest mistake is that authors don't necessarily take the time to fully read the author guidelines, for the journal that they're submitting their manuscript to. So I have a feeling this may not be completely surprising. I know the guidelines are often heavily detailed. So just a takeaway for all of us certainly is to continue to encourage authors to, fully digest and fully read the author guidelines for their journal of interest. And another detail that I always make a priority to share during any event like this is to encourage attendees to get to know and to reach out to their local liaison librarians, because those are the people that are going to be the true experts when they have questions, and really to encourage them to leverage liaison librarians really as a local kind of source of information, local source of knowledge and expertise, so that they do have help and support outside of events like this. And depending on the institution itself, so thinking of institution-specific needs, as well as the audience, whether, again, grad students alone, maybe new faculty members, a publishing webinar, which I think Sylvia has also talked about previously, a publishing webinar really has the potential to explore different topics, including the one captured here. And again, whether the event is a webinar or something in person. So I would really encourage any of you who are listening today, if you're interested in exploring some type of event, having this type of topical focus, certainly reach out to your vendor contacts. It typically will be somebody on the customer success side, but of course this could vary, publisher to publisher. And ultimately, they'll be able to point you in the right direction. They'll also be able to keep you informed of upcoming events like these or other ones that could be of relevance to you or to your library users. And of course, I do very much acknowledge that I can only speak to the Elsevier experience with this. But yeah, I always want to encourage librarians to certainly reach out to their publisher contacts. And the last thing that I'll say is, in thinking of events like this, depending on your situation, it could potentially make sense to also explore this type of event through a wider group. So maybe promoting it to everyone affiliated with the university system, maybe institutions in the same state, or even in the context of a consortium, kind of in that spirit of trying to reach, a wider group of early career researchers. So a lot of different ways to think about how something like this could ultimately take shape. And at the same time, there may be situations where maybe a webinar or an in-person workshop, maybe that doesn't make sense for your library, which is why I want to make sure that everyone is aware of Research Academy, which you can see the URL included on our slide. The Elsevier Research Academy, it's an entirely free e-learning platform, and it has been designed specifically for early and mid-career researchers. And the best thing about it is that there are more than 300 modules, and also the content is openly available. So it is completely free to explore and to use. Feel free to link to it through LibGuides. Feel free to, promote it when you're meeting with grad students, at orientation events, and really through any liaison outreach. And as an example, there are 28 modules on writing for research, and they cover everything from preparing a manuscript to data visualization, as well as writing for an interdisciplinary audience. And that, just kind of as a, something to think about as a new author, I do know that a lot of new authors are in a situation or a position of that is something that they do have to think about. So again, super practical in scope. There are also more than 40 modules on the publication process, covering a real range of topics, things like the fundamentals of publishing, as well as who should actually be included as an author. So kind of diving into that concept of authorship, finding the right journal, the always timely topic of plagiarism, as well as diving into author choice and OA. And there also are more than 26 modules on navigating peer review, which is, again, always a really interesting topic. There's even a certified peer reviewer course. And again, I'm sure we've all felt intimidated by the peer review process at some point in time, especially when we open that email, to read the feedback from reviewers. So these modules, again, do that very practical job of kind of breaking down how peer reviewers review a manuscript, how to work with feedback in a way that's more productive. And again, just a lot of insights that are directly relevant to what someone goes through when they are working with feedback from their review for their paper. And the last thing I'll mention here is Research Academy also has a YouTube channel. And the key takeaway really is Research Academy is out there, super practical, really accessible, and again, it's free. So we'll now shift into some practical tips for success, again, based on our experiences and things that, we would recommend to anyone who is thinking about exploring events like these at their own institution. And we'll also mention that once we move into the question portion of the session, we would also love to hear from anyone who is willing to share their own tips for success or their own kind of pro tips or local hacks for making events like this successful, at their own institution. So please stay tuned for that over chat. And I think at this stage, it's probably quite clear to see that events like this, they're incredibly and very much the result of collaboration, whether that is local collaboration or externally, with other groups such as publishers. And the important takeaway is always knowing that, you are always welcome and encouraged to reach out to your publisher contacts. Again, all of us are here certainly to support you. And in thinking of, planning, when we think of speakers who may be involved during these types of events, it can be really helpful to plan in advance. Speakers are often located across different time zones. They may be impacted by local holidays in terms of availability for events. They may be committed to other events, conferences, that type of thing. So planning in key, so important. And then that way you can really secure the best presenters, the best speakers, the best knowledge experts for your event. And on the logistical side, we did find that it was very helpful and really provided a smoother workflow, having a single point of contact on each side. So in the context of the webinar that I was involved with, I worked quite closely with Sylvia to organize that, the scheduling, also kind of connecting with the instructors, everything, within that realm. And that just helped overall with streamlining communication. But I'll now pass things back to Sylvia.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about our experience at NC State with timing and promotion of workshops. So having done it now for a few semesters, here's what we recommend. Cluster the workshops together and promote them as a series, but also don't promote too early. 3 weeks before the first workshop has worked well with us. And I'll say this was learned from having a semester where we spread the workshops across the whole semester and promoted, right at the beginning of the semester when folks would have empty calendars. And the registrations were great, but then attendance just really tanked. For promotion, our main strategy has been to recruit campus partners and getting the word out. So our current distribution channels include the Graduate School, the Office of Faculty Excellence, and the library's departmental library reps, so a faculty and a grad student from every academic department. And yeah, these partners have been really key, particularly the Graduate School, in getting it into the inboxes of not only graduate students and postdocs, but also the directors of graduate programs for all the colleges and departments. And then we also reach out to past registrants and highlight new offerings, as well as people who had registered, and dropped, and say, here's your second chance. We're doing it again. So these are just some of our tips. You might wonder, well, what's next? At NC State, we are continuing on. We have a new workshop this semester on negotiating your publishing contracts. And we're already also thinking about spring and beyond. So we are hoping to connect with some additional publisher partners. We've had such a good time with Shannon and Ruth from IEEE that we would love to add in some more.
Thanks, Sylvia. And on the Elsevier side, I'll just mention that there is a North American customer success team, and we do different things in our role. But one thing that we do certainly is promote upcoming webinars. The scheduling for 2025, it's currently underway. So I don't actually have specific dates to share, which is unfortunate, but know that your customer success manager, they'll certainly keep you informed and updated as events like these do become scheduled across the year. You can also check out the link on this slide, and this is where that information will be posted once the dates are finalized. Also, if anyone is interested or has questions on exploring this type of webinar or event with Elsevier specifically, the best next step, again, is reach out to your customer success manager or CSM. If you don't know who that person is, my colleague Christina is on standby, and her email address is on this slide. She can point you in the right direction. And again, I know that IEEE was involved with an event as well. So again, just reaching out to the person, who's with that publisher or on the vendor side, reach out to your contacts that way, and they can always point you in the right direction. And we're now at the end of our session. So we certainly hope that you have found this both informative as well as interesting. So we really thank you for joining. We appreciate your time. And also a big thank you to Sylvia for inviting me to team up for this. So we'll now move into questions and discussion.